On this episode of China Uncensored, oh say can you obey China's national anthem law? Google is super proud of its censored Chinese search engine. And finally, not even death can protect you from Xi Jinping. This is China Uncensored. Hi, welcome to China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. I want to talk to you today about disrespecting the national anthem. Oh no, not touching that. I'm talking about 20-year-old Yang Kai-li, a Chinese video blogger or vlogger. She has tens of millions of followers, but in a recent broadcast, or stream as they call it, she sang along to the Chinese national anthem, March of the Volunteers. Disgusting, I know. Such disregard for patriotism. Obviously, in an appropriate show of force, she was detained by police for 5 days. This statement by authorities say her actions were an insult to the dignity of the national anthem, which repelled internet users. Repelled internet users, that's a funny term to use for something that catches the international spotlight. Anyway, the Chinese live streaming platform she was using, Huya, deleted her account and took down all her videos. Then, Yang Kai-li reappeared with a public apology for her, quote, stupid, low-level mistakes. You gotta love public apologies. She went on to say, my behavior deeply hurt everyone's feelings. Sorry. Sorry to the motherland. Sorry to my fans. Sorry to everyone online. Sorry to the platform. And then she went on to say she would stop all broadcasting work, carry out self-reformation, painstakingly deepen reflection, fully accept ideological politics and patriotic education, and diligently study the relevant laws and regulations of the national anthem law of the People's Republic of China. Wow, that makes the People's Republic of China sound like a very normal country where everything is very normal. But guess what? Miss Yang got off lucky. You see, the Communist Party is very serious about the national anthem. She was only detained for 5 days instead of 15 days, which is what the law allowed for. That is, until last year, when the Chinese government passed the national anthem law. Under the new law, if you disrespect the national anthem, you can be sentenced to up to 3 years. Too bad Miss Yang wasn't in Hong Kong, where free speech is still protected. Mostly. In Hong Kong, sports enthusiasts have made a habit out of mocking the Chinese national anthem, as you can see in this video from the South China Morning Post. Since Hong Kong is supposed to be governed under a different system as the rest of mainland China, the national anthem law hasn't passed there. Yet. But China's rubber stamp National People's Congress has demanded that they do. And with the way things are going in Hong Kong, it might not be much longer until the Communist Party makes them take a knee. But hey, here's a bit of good news for everyone. According to my favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, stability is on the rise in Xinjiang. You can tell by the happy ethnic women dancing. In this very long interview with the other state-run Chinese media, Xinhua, the senior official in Xinjiang says it's because of the vocational education and training camps they've set up there that are also very people-oriented and bringing people into the modern world. I mean, that's why 1 million people have volunteered to go. And yes, they went voluntarily, don't be silly. I mean, according to Chinese law, it would be illegal to keep these people in indefinite detention. As a result of the vocational training, that senior official says, the social environment of Xinjiang has seen notable changes, with a healthy atmosphere on the rise. Which is very true, if by healthy atmosphere you mean the atmosphere of people living in fear of being taken away by the authorities. Chinese state-run China Daily is making a clear threat to Australia. It warns there is a fragile peace that can be shattered by the slightest misstep. Also, it's a tightrope, which I guess means that if you take the slightest misstep, you'll fall from the tightrope and shatter on the ground. Okay, the metaphor is weird, but the message is pretty clear. They're saying Australia needs to choose between China and the U.S. It follows Australia saying it would engage in more naval cooperation with the U.S. in the South China Sea. So China is trying to compete with the U.S. for Australia's love. Don't worry, I have a solution. We can just cut Australia in half and give one piece to the US and one to China. I hope we get to keep the half with the koalas. But there's one neighbor of Australia that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't need to worry about: New Zealand, because it already has so much of New Zealand's love. In a story that sounds all too familiar, a top politician has been accused of taking large donations from a Chinese businessman tied to the Chinese Communist Party. Simon Bridges is the leader of New Zealand's National Party. He's been accused of concealing a donation worth $65,000 from a Chinese businessman, Zhang Yi-kun. And get this, Simon Bridges was exposed by a member of his own party, who released a secretly recorded telephone conversation. Now, New Zealand does have a new electoral law that requires disclosing political donations above a certain sum. But allegedly, Bridges and Zhang got around it by agreeing to divide up the money into smaller chunks below the threshold for disclosure. Smart thinking, guys. Bridges has said that it's not illegal to divide the donations because they were from several of Zhang's supporters and not from one person. That's not really the concerning part about the story, though. Zhang Yi-kun was a member of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. A lot of people who are part of that group are also part of the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. It's a shadowy organization whose goal is to make everyone who's not part of the Communist Party love the Communist Party. Sometimes they achieve this through money and gifts, sometimes through intimidation and violence. What's not to love? Speaking of loving the Chinese Communist Party, Google. Okay, I'm not saying Google necessarily loves the party, but they do want to get a piece of that sweet, sweet China market. And Google seems to be moving ahead full steam with its new censored search engine. Apparently, the CEO said entering China would align with Google's mission to provide information to the world's population. But people are concerned that in China, Google would provide information to the people in the same way Taco Bell provides wholesome, authentic Mexican food. Not because Google wouldn't want to provide good information, but because they would have to follow Chinese laws and censor that information. Plus, there's the whole large multinational corporation bowing to China's censorship demands, which encourages other companies to do the same. But, in case you were concerned, don't worry. Google's tests of its censored search engine are going great. And finally, as you know if you've been watching China Uncensored, Chinese leader Xi Jinping has been purging his political enemies, and the military has been one of his big targets. Most recently, Zhang Yang. He headed the political work department that oversees the People's Liberation Army. Now, Zhang thought of a clever way to get out of the corruption probe. He killed himself. But that didn't stop the party from expelling him anyway and stripping his rank. Which is pretty cold. The party then indicted another general who was too stubborn to take the easy way out. Since he's still alive, he's now facing a court-martial. Corruption has long been considered rife within the PLA, with some top generals reported to have accumulated vast fortunes in cash and gifts, including golden statues of Mao Zedong and cases of expensive liquor stacked to the ceiling in underground caches. And many positions were filled by people tied to Xi Jinping's rival, former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin. And before we go, now is the time when I answer questions from you, my loyal 50-cent army, fans of the show who support what we do through the crowdfunding website Patreon. Captain Dan-tastic asks, what other news resources do you consider comparable to China Uncensored for unbiased and critical information on China and its surrounding area? I mean, what can compare with the research and wit and humor of China Uncensored? However, there are plenty of other sources I can recommend. When possible, go for the in-depth stuff. For China's relations with other countries, read Anne-Marie Brady's Magic Weapons, Clive Hamilton's Silent Invasion, A 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury. For the inner workings of the Communist Party, there's The Party by Richard McGregor. For recent Chinese history, there are books like Mao's Great Famine and the Cultural Revolution by Frank Decatur. Also, The People's Republic of Amnesia by Louis Lim, which is about the Tiananmen Square massacre and its aftermath. For media, well, there's my favorite American state-run media, Radio Free Asia. Or for Hong Kong, I recommend my friends over at Hong Kong Free Press. But really, it's good to get a variety of viewpoints. Read the New York Times. Read the Financial Times. Read the Epoch Times. Listen to that crazy guy on the subway who says Confucius flew to China from Egypt on a giant pyramid. Not that you have to believe him. That's not a complete list, but I hope you can walk away with the knowledge that there are flying pyramids. Wait, what was the question again? Anyway, if you'd like to ask me a question, head over to patreon.com/China Uncensored. Your support makes this show possible, and in return, I'll answer your questions. So once again, thanks for watching this episode of China Uncensored. I'm your host, Chris Chappell. See you next time. As I mentioned, China Uncensored is supported mainly through direct viewer contributions. Go to patreon.com/China Uncensored or click this orange button. Check out all the cool rewards you get for being a Patreon supporter, including, of course, having me answer your questions on the show.